guys have contrasting opinions. Single sex, good or bad? Lucy, first of all.
Well, there are obviously fantastic schools in both camps, but I think they're great. I went to a single-sex school. Both my children are at single-sex schools, and there's an awful lot to recommend them. And an awful lot of parents who went to single-sex schools do seem to end up choosing them as a family with their own children. So, yeah, I'm definitely in favour.
For single-sex schools. Antonella, you take a different view. Tell us why you're not in favour of single-sex schools.
Well, my own experience of them was absolutely horrendous with my daughter. I think they're completely archaic. Only around 6% of schools are single sex, and to me that's far too much. It's a completely artificial environment. You know, we're not segregated in the workplace, and I think it might be good academically, but socially, I think with social skills and preparing you for the world, I think it's just terrible.
The University of Limerick are not even sure it is good academically. They can see no discernible difference in studies as regards qualifications and whatever on that. But Antonella, what do you think? I mean, you talk about your daughter's experience there. I often examine myself and think to myself, am I slightly odd that I went, to single-sex schools and you only had that experience of boys and men around you? What do you think I've missed out on, Antonella?
Well, in my own experience, my daughter, since preschool, she was with boys. Primary, she was with boys. She was happy. Play dates, she had boys and girls. And then suddenly we were thrown into this world where, they were all in girls together. She missed having friends as boys. And also, I mean, the advantages I've read about apparently are the fact that, boys monopolise conversations and are dominating, and having a single-sex school removes that. Well, that's fine while you're in the school, but when you leave, as far as I'm concerned, you're at a disadvantage because you've not had 6 to 7 years of a natural relationship with men. If a man is dominating and monopolising conversation, then surely it's better to be taught skills.
Well, my experience is that it's women who dominate conversations.
I'm trying to ask a question. But Lucy, look, from my experience, and everyone I think always just relates this back to what they have experienced and what worked for them. I genuinely believe you should just decide based on what you think would be good for your children. I look at my kids, I think my son would probably benefit from a co-ed environment because I think girls can calm down wayward boys. I think my daughter would probably do well in a school like I did, which was an all-girl environment. But having at 16 gone to a co-ed environment, I was shocked, actually, in perhaps the lack of focus on girls' things. So I'd come from a school that's very good at netball, for example. We were county winners, and then we had a maths teacher teaching netball at the co-ed school. It wasn't a priority. The boys' rugby was right up there. The girls' school was almost like experts in girls, and I flourished in that environment.
That's absolutely right. When you go to a single-sex school, you are dealing with a teaching body that are absolute specialists in girls or boys, but they're not citadels like Eamon described anymore. Any good girls or boys school is doing lots and lots of things with partner schools or neighbouring schools. They'll be doing plays and debates and societies so that they're not blocking out boys completely. There are usually lots of joint initiatives, but you will find in an all-boys school that there'll be more clubs that really lean into the sort of things boys love to do. There'll be, they may be very, macho tech clubs in a girls' school as well, but the girls will obviously be taking a lead in them and won't be sort of overwhelmed by boys who are absolutely obsessed with the idea of building a microlight or whatever. The girls will get to take a lead. And in sport, it does make a big impact. If you have a mixed intake, you have the same size sports staff split across more sports. So you do tend to get greater sporting prowess, I think, from single-sex schools. And I can think of a couple of schools that have, that were all boys that have gone mixed and have subsequently really slumped in their sort of rankings in rugby and football, which counts a lot for a lot of kids. Sport's hugely important in school and a great part of how they find themselves. But you're absolutely right that as a family, you have to think what would suit your child, and the children themselves often have a really clear idea about it. But for my two, I think they really liked the idea of being able to learn in an environment without the whole sort of potential boyfriend-girlfriend thing, without that kind of emotional relationship side of life impinging on classwork, so that you don't ever go through the situation of a current or ex-boyfriend or girlfriend sitting two desks away. That sort of thing is for after school. And they both found that just a reassuring thing, so that school can be a really relaxing, welcoming, supportive place to find their own voice and work out who and what they want to be.
Final thought from Antonella on that. Of course. Yeah. Yes, please.
Well, I think the opposite is completely true of most single-sex schools. The girls at the other thing I was going to mention was the complete toxic atmosphere at this school that still goes on, and there's another single-sex school in the same catchment area, the same problem. Because they're not mixing with boys and they're not having a natural relationship that you would at the workplace. I mean, you know, not everyone in the workplace fancies each other and can't bear to sit next to the desk. I mean, I expect, Eamon, you think they all fancy you, but you know, people don't.
You've heard it as well. Yeah.
It's a tough job sitting here, let me tell you.
But what I'm saying is, because of the lack of boys, these girls just became this terrible, toxic atmosphere of bitchiness, of terrible, terrible bullying, and there were awful, and it went on in school and out of school. And I feel that if there'd been boys there, because they're not with boys, they became obsessed with boys, and that's all they talked about. That's all they were, interested in. You know, they weren't actually doing lessons. It was mostly talking about which boy they fancied and arguing. And there was a lot of self-harming and all
That's
sorts.
the difference between boys and girls. I mean, at school, I wouldn't say we were obsessed with girls at school. We were obsessed with football and pop music and things like that.